Babuji Maharaj used to say so much about Lalaji Maharaj that I had one regret, that I coexisted with Lalaji Maharaj for the last 5 years of his life and yet never managed to see him. I mean, people might smile or laugh because what could a baby of 5 do with the great master? But suppose I had been exposed to him and merely having been looked at by him would have made a big difference. I mean, I'm saying this without disrespect to Babuji Maharaj or to what he has conferred upon me, because Babuji used to praise him and show his love for him in so many different ways that I have felt this as a definite spiritual loss in my own life. Subsequently, of course, perhaps Lalaji Maharaj in his own way, in his grace, compensated for this by appearing to me in some experiences I have related in my books on 1 or 2 occasions. And Babuji was so enormously pleased. He said, Dekho, today you have had Lalaji's darshan, and few have it. On the first occasion, I was walking through a tunnel, and the other end of the tunnel was like a pinpoint of light. As I proceeded at the speed of light almost, that pinpoint widened and became the exit, and I came out, and there was an enormous crystal ball. And in it I saw first Babuji Maharaj, then Lalaji Maharaj in a golden frame, visage, not a frame in the sense of picture frame, but as if he was made of gold but smiling and in his usual pose, his serene pose. Babuji changed to Lalaji, and finally Lalaji changed into myself. Not like a reflection, with my right ear appearing as the left ear there, not that, but as if I am there myself. Later Babuji told me, this is the secret of spirituality, that when you search for him, you find yourself. Therefore it is called divine revelation, also self-revelation. Divine realization is self-realization, because the self, with a capital S, is our real self, and the other self, which we refer to as myself, is the gross, worldly self, made up of matter, mind, leaving the soul separate, which means that the normal human being lives without the soul coming into play in his life. The soul acts as a silent witness, and as the Purusha Sukta of the Upanishad Vedas says, he is eternally there in the form of a tiny atomic flame. See? And he has to be awakened to our life. Otherwise, he passes through life after life as our eternal companion. That's why God is also called the eternal companion. But he is a companion who is asleep, Sushupt. So spirituality, and especially the first sitting of the Master, when he touches and awakens that, then this becomes, this inner self, the higher self, awakens and takes up the reins, as it were, provided we are willing to hand it over to him. Then he becomes that famous figure in the Gita. There is the chariot, there is Arjuna, and there is the Krishna, Lord Krishna driving the chariot. It is a symbolism that now the soul, which is a part of the divine itself, the ultimate divinity, has taken charge, and the man sitting inside is the man whose life is being driven. See? So we can say such lives are God-driven, divine purpose-driven, driven to a divine destination. Because as Lord Krishna says in the Gita, if you go in this way, along the path indicated by me, you shall reach that Paramdhama or that ultimate abode, having reached which nobody returns. Yad gatva nanivartante tadhava paramam mama, he says in Sanskrit, you see. So that is the purpose of the Purusha. We also call the higher self the Purusha, and our soul is but an amsha of that Purusha, a part of that Purusha, an atomic presence of the ultimate Purusha, which we should hand over control to all the day we are inducted into Sahaj Marg. And that handing over is called surrender. It's nothing more, you see. It doesn't mean I lose myself, I annihilate myself, like the Western people always talk, ask. Does it not mean self-annihilation? Not at all. It only means handing over charge of yourself to somebody who can guide and control your life in the way it should be run, just thus removing your responsibilities in the matter, so that you can serenely go, like a man in a train or a plane. He doesn't worry about how it is going, where it is going, because he knows the destination is there. So for this reason, I had felt, that if I had been blessed by being presented before Lalaji Maharaj, my spiritual journey may have been awakened much earlier. Instead of waiting till 28 years of age, I would have started it perhaps even before my 5th year, you see. Because like people used to bring babies to Babaji Maharaj to be blessed. What is the purpose? It's not to say blessed. No. It is that his divine gaze may fall upon the child and awaken this. Because before 18 we are not allowed to meditate. So spirituality begins before we can start the practice of spirituality as adults. That is the idea of blessing a child or blessing a mother even before she has been delivered of her baby. You see how deep spirituality goes. Because when we go back into spiritual lives, we find that so many past lives have been undergone, in which we had opportunities which we either missed or which we lost. And then we are here. And at least in this life, we should not go. Because Adi Shankara says, 3 things of which few can dream even. To be born in this Bhuloka, the world of human beings, from where only liberation is possible. From no other world is liberation possible. To be born at the same time as a great Guru who is alive on our planet, present on our planet. Second blessing. Because you may be born when no Guru is available, no such presence is available, no such help is available. And the third and most important, having him there and you here, to be able to go to him, accept him as your master and surrender to him. These 3 are the greatest blessings that can be given by God to a soul which is a seeking soul. And I assume, you see, every one of our Abhyasis has been blessed like this. And if they still miss the opportunity, it is only their self-will which is dominant, which says, I don't need assistance. Self-will manifesting as egotism, as independence, as I can do it, that sort of feeling. And of course, the final expression is, why do I need anybody's help? We were watching a presentation on DVD yesterday of something like a debate between, who was that guy? The psychologist. C.S. Lewis and who was that? Sigmund Freud. Both became atheists. Lewis because of his life experience, because he lost his father very early in life, and things like that, or mother, and things like that. And Freud, who came to true science and said religion cannot explain so many things, as if science can. See? There's a famous saying which says science can only say how things happen. It cannot ask the question why. It cannot answer. Chlorophyll is green. Why is chlorophyll green? It cannot answer. Why not 3 legs? We have not come across anything with 3 legs except stools. 2 legs, 4 legs, 6 legs, centipedes, but no 3 legs, except in novels of science fiction. So you see, science, to think that science answers all questions is a sort of, shall we say, a superstition in itself. And I remember once Dr. Varadachari explained superstition as coming from 2 words, super and stitia. Something standing on something else to take, the authority of that on which it is standing. So we stand on science and claim that science has no superstition. Babuji dispelled this in one of my early talks with him. He said in science there is more superstition than in religion. Religion, at least there are valid superstitions which help us. Like you pray to God, you get some relief. But in science there is no relief ever, you see. A man goes mad and there is no relief. Science says how he became mad. I mean, it attempts, he had this trauma, he had that trauma, but it can do nothing more. So we have to be very careful about how we handle science, and that is why Babuji said right from the beginning, throw away the intellect if you want to be a spiritual person. The intellect has no place in an abhyasi's life. For your mundane requirements, whether I should buy potatoes or cheese, whether I should marry this girl or that girl, whether I should go to Germany for a job or to Tokyo. For these you use your brain power to the extent possible. Because there also something called destiny intervenes, and that is his plan which is against your plan maybe, or supporting your plan perhaps. So Babuji once told me that all accidents are divine plans, whereas everything we plan can become an accident here. Somebody decides to go from say Argentina to Peru, and his plane crashes, like 2 days back we had a tremendous plane crash there. What happens? His plan went awry, as they say in English literature. The plans, the best of plans laid by mice and men oft go awry. Anything from mice to men, he says. Don't depend on your plans. That is why, sometimes I have been criticized by Westerners especially, that you don't keep up your plans. I have always maintained my plans. But they are, they think Indians are always late, Indian times are always late, whereas it's the opposite. You go to Germany and the plane is 2.5 hours late, oh, it must have been thundering over Frankfurt. Yes, so everybody picks up his apple and sausage and goes into the plane, smiling, because Germany planes are not late. What can you do if there's a thunderstorm? But if it is like this weather in India and a plane is late, in India, immer, which means always, always. That is the white man's, arrogance. That even when a train is late, in Europe it is on time. Because it's not the train's fault, something interfered with it. You understand? So, we must understand one thing, that every action of ours, whether we surrender or not, is controlled. The nearest thing approaching this sort of life is the cosmonaut's life. Every action of his, from sleeping to taking his nourishment to defecating, is controlled by ground control somewhere. He wakes up on time, he eats on time, he goes to the toilet on time. He cannot waver from it for even 1 minute. Ting, he is awake. Report. Eat. And you get to something squeezed into your mouth, like awful toothpaste, not even good paste. It smells and tastes like some other things, But they have to take it. They have been trained. No, go to the toilet. You cannot say, I cannot. Do it. Yes, boss. No, that is not surrender. See, that is technological greatness, soundness, and genius. That you have been trained for 2-3 years and you are now in a vehicle which is extra terrestrial and which is going around orbiting the sun. And behold, there is a God on earth who is controlling my actions, every action. But fortunately, he is not God, it is ground control. See? So the Western mind can acquire and accept strictest control possible, provided it is not a divine order, but a human order. We are trained on the contrary to accept a divine order and suspect a human order, because human orders are based on human thinking, human aspirations, human longings, and the human desire for acquisition. And of course, the inherent tendency in human beings to rob, to steal. Expansionist tendencies. I want more territory. You have Alexander the Great. How he became the great is some mystery, you know. Then you have Hitler, you have Mussolini, and you have the expansionists in America, the white people who invaded an ancient land and drove the local people out. And then you have the expansionists in other countries, you see. For instance, we had the Mughals in India who ruled us for, I don't know, 400 years, something like that. And then came the British, 250 years. And now, of course, we are independent, but we are misruling ourselves because our rulers don't listen to the voice of God. They listen to their own inner so-called voice or so-called inner voice, which tells them, aspire for position, become the next prime minister. You will do good, you know. It reminds me of that guy in The Lord of the Rings who has obsessed the king, you know, the king of that horse country. What's his name? Of Rohan, Theoden, king. Why do you corrupt a mind already so badly affected? No. And the king is already possessed, you see. So we are taught to beware of even governments. Be careful with governments. Obey the law because that is implied in every legal situation. You have to obey it. But as Babuji said, follow with discrimination even the master. The thing which brought me closest to my master was something about responsibility, you know, obedience. He said obedience cannot be a total thing. Obedience must conform to 4 principles of which Lalaji Maharaj spoke. He said, you see how great Lalaji was. He provided for all situations. In Sahaj Marg, there is no automatic rule that you obey everything the master says. I said, under what circumstances are we allowed not to obey? He said, if the order that the master gives you goes against your shastras, your religious tradition, if it goes against your scriptures, you know, if it goes against your own conscience. 3 things. In such cases, you have a right to disobey the master. Of course, I took it with a pinch of salt because at the highest levels of spirituality, even these don't apply. That is my conviction. I am not going beyond what Lalaji Maharaj stipulated. That is applicable only up to a certain level. Like even in civil law, you don't like wars, you refuse to participate in a war. You can say, I will not fight, but you have to take the consequence, you go to jail. You know. So there are situations where obedience is implicit, and if you disobey even at that stage, there is a punishment. But as we say in Tamil, what came up to the head only took the turban. See? So Babuji said, you know, on one occasion he was given an order, and he tried and tried, but he couldn't do it. First day, Lalaji frowned, you know, he came, he said, Ramchandar, 1 day has gone. He said, Your Holiness, I am aware of it. Second day, it was not done. Lalaji Maharaj appeared. Lalaji, Ramchandar, do you know 2 days have passed? He said, Huzur, which means holiness or your greatness. I am aware of it. Third day he said, you have disobeyed me for 3 days and frowned upon me, you see. Now Babuji used to say, he frowned upon me. I said, what happened? I said, Guru Maharaj, you can give me whatever punishment you desire. That was the highest surrender, you know. Lalaji smiled and said, I knew you would not be able to do this. I will do it myself. On another occasion, he carried out the order. And he had to go hungry because when he reached his destination, he found all the shops, restaurants, everything was closed. Some result of his own work. And he said, look here, I have to go hungry, though I obeyed his order. So when Guru's order goes against nature's edicts, Guru is of course supreme. He is the ruling authority in the living present. Nature's orders are blind orders. He obeyed, but he had to pay the price, which was a minuscule thing, you know, for which somebody else may have had 30 years of prison. He had to fast 20. So, obeying the Master can never be at a loss to ourselves. We gain his approbation, his happiness. He comes smiling before and says, well done. You see, whereas if you don't obey, Sisyphus, down. I remember one occasion when I had to fast for 5 days, see, in Denmark. He said, Parthasarthi, will you accept what I am going to say? I said, of course, no question of not accepting. He said, I want you to fast tomorrow. I said, for this you are asking so many questions. Done. Next day I fasted. That night he came again. I mean, we were sharing the same room. Before going to bed, he tapped me on the shoulder and said, I have to request. I said, Babuji, please don't embarrass me. He said, I want you to be hungry tomorrow also. I said, yes, why not? Enough for me to support me through days. He smiled. Third day again. Fourth day again, with different words. Fifth day he said, today, you know, I am afraid to make this request, but I have to ask you to not eat tomorrow also. I said, Babuji, you can go on asking me not to eat, I won't bother. I am comfortable, I am giving sittings, you have seen. He said, I am telling you, Lalaji says you can drink milk. I said, I don't tolerate milk, so it's no use, you see. He said, all right, you like the orange juice, no? You can have as many as you want. So 5 days I had. And then on the 6th morning, he gave me a sitting. And after about 40 minutes of sitting, he said, today, Lalaji Maharaj has blessed you by raising you to the position of Parishad, which is the penultimate rank in the spiritual hierarchy. Mahaparishad, Parishad. He said this position has been vacant for nobody knows how many years. And I was in a hurry to give it to you because nature may fulfill it from some other source, you see, which I would not have tolerated. So I petitioned Lalaji Maharaj. And he said, he is here, what are you waiting for? So I took up this work. Now suppose you go around, you know, what is the Sahaj Marg, you know, fasting. What is the difference between old religion and Christianity and this? Christianity says fast, Babuji says fast. Hinduism says fast, Babuji says fast. And they say this is a new system, a revolutionary system, a system without do's and don'ts. You understand the foolishness of people who ask silly questions like this. They don't understand that a doctor can forbid two people the same thing. You are having diarrhea, he says, no chilies. Another man is having some other disease which will not tolerate chilies, he says no chilies. But doctor, we have two different diseases. And you are prohibiting the same thing. He is a stupid doctor. Whoever goes, he says no chilies. This is the sort of thinking that the ordinary, average, this is Occidental person brings to his search for spiritual life. Babuji always deplored this. He said the first etiquette, which is not observed at all by even one person in a million, is to never question the master. You can question and ask, how do you do it? But not why do you do it? You understand? How, yes. Why, no. So that was the, preliminary teachings of Sahaj Marg. When we spoke of Lalaji Maharaj, Babuji spoke of Lalaji Maharaj, praising him and always talking about him. He said this, he said that. When we were abroad, very often I used to, press his feet. I was alone with him in the same room. Sometimes it was only this size. And he would wake me up. Parthasarthi, are you sleeping? Initially, I used to say, yes. He said, that means you're not sleeping. Come here. No. And then he would tell me, Lalaji said this, I'm going to tell you something Lalaji said, which is worth 64 lakhs of rupees. And he would tell me what Lalaji said. At other times, I would pretend that I was asleep. Then he would cough, and then repeat Parthasarthi. He never said Parthasarthi. You couldn't say it. He said, Parthasarthi. I said, Haan, Babuji. Are you sleeping? I said, no, you have woken me up just now. No, but you are a young fellow. You will recover. You come here. And then Lalaji said something, you see. And then, of course, it would go on till morning, 5 o'clock. So many things. And I remember, sometimes he would weep. I remember the first time I saw him weeping, or rather tears coming into his eyes, was during the Lalaji Maharaj birth centenary, which we celebrated here in Madras. He was reading out a message. And when he made a reference to Lalaji Maharaj, his eyes became wet, his spectacles clouded over. He had to pause, wipe his eyes and start again. You can hear it in that speech. The break is there distinctly. This has occurred also when he sang that famous song which was Lalaji's favorite, Deenana Dukhu Harana Nath. But 2-3 stanzas through the music, and he had to stop because he became emotional and he could not continue. So that is the sort of thing, you see, about which he writes in his voice reel, that there was an Abhyasi of Lalaji Maharaj who was able to wake up at night before Lalaji got up to go to the bathroom and stand ready with a pot of water and a towel. And Lalaji was very pleased. I asked him a rather impertinent question. I said, how is it he did not become the successor of Lalaji Maharaj, you see, when he was so alert? And then he gave that famous example. Any moth can immolate itself in a living flame. Rare is the moth which can immolate itself in a dead flame. See? So every man loves his wife when she is alive. And if you are in many countries, the first thing you do after she is dead is to find the second one. And the third one. It goes on, you see, serial romances. Here it is not like that. I shouldn't boast about my late father, but he lost his wife when he was 28. And she was, I think, 22. My mother was born in 1911, married in 1922, died in 1933. 11, 22, 33. And my father never married again. And he lived till 83. He lived to be 83 years old. So you see, that is the idea of love. Love does not die with the person who is loved. And Babuji was an exemplary illustration of this, He loved Lalaji like he loved nothing else. Of course, he loved his wife because strangely both of them had 9 children each, Lalaji Maharaj and Babuji Maharaj. It's a little known fact. When Babuji Maharaj saw his wife was dying, he went to see her. And he saw what we all call Yama's noose, the Lord of Death takes souls by throwing a noose like a lasso, and pulls the soul out of the body. He was so angry. He was enraged, you see. He was preparing to destroy Yama. Lalaji spoke. By then, Lalaji had gone out of this world. He spoke from there and said, yes, Ramchandra, you can do it. But remember, if you do it, you have to take up his job. And Babuji said, who will take up that dirty job, you know? It is like a latrine cleaner's work. You know, in the former days, latrines used to be cleaned physically. There were no flush toilets. And then he just used his power and cut that noose from his wife's neck and threw it away. Of course, he died, but in a different way. So that is to show that he loved his wife so much that Sister Kasturi once told me, after that his life went out of him. In the sense of his, normal human life went out of him. So Babuji Maharaj lived many years after his wife passed away. I think his wife must have passed away sometime in the 50s. More than 30 years he lived after her. He never spoke about her. He never mentioned her once. Except to talk sometimes of Sarvesh, who is fortunately with us today, to say that, this young boy lost his mother at a very young age. Therefore, I am always concerned about him. He was always concerned about Sarvesh, what will happen to him, because the two elder brothers, he did not trust that they would look after him. In fact, he had many nightmares about Sarvesh. But that we need not recount here because they don't form part of this episode. And then, of course, he loved everybody, or at least everybody said, Babuji loves me. Anybody who did not meditate, who was irregular for satsang, he said, Chayji, Babuji loves me. Why should I do anything? And when I put them before Babuji, and the person asked, Babuji, do you love me? He would just look penetratingly, give a smile and go to his hookah. And that fellow thought it was assent. I said, Babuji, why don't you tell them the truth? He said, look here, how can I say I don't love them when I love everybody? Which is not the same thing. I can love everybody without loving anybody particularly. It rains, but it does not rain for me or for you. Though each one can make use of that rain if he wishes. So nature loves all of us, but the prepared person or the man who has prepared his field uses the rain. The man who has not prepared his field, the rain goes waste. Similarly, Guru's love is there for everybody, provided you use it for your growth, for your benefit. If not, it is like water pouring and going around the gutter. Nature is always blessing, provided you are willing to accept it. So again and again we come to this idea of, I must accept. Without my acceptance, nature doesn't work for me, climate doesn't work for me, master doesn't work for me, God doesn't work for me. So this eternal willingness is the second aspect of surrender. I am willing. Will you do it? I am willing. Will you eat? I am willing. Will you go to Timbuktu and start a center there? I am willing. I have always been willing. I am eternally willing. Surrender. You understand? No, I cannot do this. I have my wife and children at home. They are already complaining. My wife is threatening to divorce me. She says, you don't spend any time with me. This is a common Occidental complaint. Either from husband or from wife, whichever party it is. I don't know what they do when they stay at home with the wife. I hope all these lessons, at least now they will learn, because also I am now in my 80th year. And it is important that these lessons are learned while I am here so that I can see, as Babuji Maharaj said himself in his lifetime, even though there shall be one after me who will take care of you in the same way as I am doing, nevertheless, I would like to see you all reach the destination in my lifetime. I repeat what he said to me and to others. Now that it is my turn to repeat, I am repeating because 80 is quite an old age. And people who think I will live eternally are wrong. And people who think I will live long may be disappointed. And here comes the definition of wisdom, as Babuji Maharaj once told me. I said, what is wisdom? He said, to live as if you are going to die the next moment. Make sure you accept the next sitting from your master as if it is your last. Put your whole life into it and you see the difference. But we say one more sitting, it was very good. So that is wisdom. Another definition Babuji Maharaj gave out of wisdom was to take the right man for the right job. No other consideration. Not whether he is a genius or a PhD or white or black or Japanese, nothing. He sees the right man for this job. Give it to him, whoever it may be. We choose as humans, German chooses. The German, the Italian chooses. In Italian, the Hindu teaches. I mean, we don't have to go through the list. And of course, people in government take their relatives first. Ministers take their sons, nephews, third removed nephews, seventh removed nephews, then their own villagers, their own caste, their own community. No? So we have what we have in India. Chaos, poor government, bad civic structures, poor education for people, illiteracy in most places, yet India survives. I cannot help but repeat a joke here, you see, which is said about Indira Gandhi. Indira Gandhi came to power and wanted to reform India completely. So she called all the experts in the world, about 40 of them, top experts in different fields, civil engineering, mechanical engineering, computer engineering, the people who construct dams, who put up vast electricity projects, missiles, anything you name it, she had. She said, gentlemen, I give you 3 years. I want my country transformed. In 3 months, we will meet to discuss your plans. 3 months later, she met. And all of them stood up and said, my lady, we congratulate you on governing the only country in this world in which God exists. And she asked, how do you come to this conclusion? So they said, you go to the railway station, you want to buy a ticket, the man who sells the ticket is not there, but the trains are running. You go to the station yard, the engine is there, the driver is not there, yet your trains are running. You want to go to the power station, the man who should operate the power switches is not there, yet your cities are electrified. And generally they are electrified. Who else can we give the credit to except God? I was both very happy and very sad when I heard this joke. Very sad because it was a comment on India, see. And that comment was a double-edged sword. On one side it was a compliment because I often think that this is the only country where really God exists. Excuse me, I am not trying to hurt other people, people of other religions, of other nations, but this is my personal experience. Other countries talk of God, they worship God, they build temples, mosques, what have you, for God. But as we all know, God is not there. As Babuji said, God has no religion and religions have no God. This is a direct, proof. We have in temples idols. We have in churches crosses with Christ crucified on it, poor fellow. Why he was crucified once, was that not enough? We have to hang him again and again in every church, in every citadel, in every small shrine that we build in his memory for Christianity's sake. And this is funded liberally by the Pope, by the Vatican. Islam says no figures, no idols, but they have a blank wall. I don't know why a blank wall cannot be a representative of something, and in place of an idol, you have a blank wall. Even in mathematics, we say let x be the solution. Without that, you cannot solve any equation. And this Babuji told me once, he said, one idol worship is not wrong if it is done in the right way. I said, what is the right way? He said, to know that the idol is nothing but a representative of God, and that you worship God through it, but don't worship it. You see, people who covet money and, are misers, hoarding money, they worship money for money's sake. Intelligent people know that this is only something which can be used to buy something else. Money by itself has no use. Suppose I have $1 million Deutschmark here in cash, what can I do with it? Even a baker will not sell me a loaf of bread. Isn't it? So we convert money. Go to England, you change it into pounds. Go to Germany, it is good. Go to Italy, but of course now in Europe it's all euro. Still you have to convert to euro. So we cannot take this, what is wonderfully called filthy lucre, it's called, It cannot go with us. So Babuji said, Babuji Maharaj said, build your wealth, but a wealth you can take with you. Here everything remains behind. He said, to the extent that even this body on which you spend so much time, to whose pleasure you spend so much time, so much energy, not knowing this body is not you. You are something inner, serene, majestic, divine. And you are pampering this body, washing it, perfuming it, shaving it, cleaning it, letting it mate indiscriminately. To what purpose? Even this body you will have to leave, he said. You are not only going to leave your house, this body which is the house of your soul, even this has to be vacated. And after you it will be destroyed. Know this and know that all your life you must struggle to lay up that wealth which will accompany you, which is spiritual wealth. Meditation, as Babuji defined, is to think about one thing continuously, without break. So one person asked Babuji, it must be easy because we are always thinking. He said, yes, but you are thinking 1,000 thoughts. And no thought is complete. And no thought leads anywhere because it is not complete. So this man asked him, what is a complete thought? He said, a complete thought is like digging a well. Go on digging until you find water. He said, but that means only one thought. He said, that's what I told you, to think continuously about one thing at one time. See? So meditation is digging a well. And when you dig a well, initially some rocks and rubbish come out, then old things come out, then some layer of rock comes out, then comes sand, and finally comes water. So it requires patience, it requires effort, it requires hard effort, and of course it requires time. So Babuji said, without patience, there is no success. And he said, suppose you have patience but you don't work. So with patience, you need to work also. Work does not mean taking a sabbal, what do you call sabbal? Sabbal. Crowbar. Without a crowbar, you can't dig. So for each object, for each activity, there are appropriate tools, techniques. What are the tools and techniques in meditation? You need a place where you can meditate every day at the same time. Babuji said this is to ensure that when you enter that place, you automatically fall into the mood for meditation. So that is important in the daily life of an Abhyasi, that you use the same place every morning at the same time for meditation. When it becomes a routine, you go there and you start meditating even before you are sitting in place. And then meditating long enough, 1 hour. Some people asked, why 1 hour? Why not 2? Why not half? He said, because of circumstances, because of people's pressure on me, what used to be 1 hour, I have reduced to half an hour now, but it's not good. It is a weakness on my part, I am telling you, Babuji said, because I have reduced it. And I have to do the rest for you people. Whereas if you meditated 1 hour every day yourself, your progress would be much faster. When a train doesn't move, you try to push it. If it moves at 5 miles an hour, you don't push so much, you push less. If it goes at 60 miles, you don't push at all. So we have to do this 1 hour meditation at the same place, every morning, at the same time. Why 1 hour limit? Somebody asked Babuji. He said if you meditate more than 1 hour, there is pressure on the brain and that will affect. So at one time you must meditate only 1 hour Though you can do it as many times as you like in a day. If you are free, you can meditate again and again, 1 hour each time. But as a kriya, as a niyam, as a discipline, morning meditation is a must. And Babuji has also said if you wake up like Clark at 4 o'clock and you meditate 1 hour and go to sleep, then you have to do it again. So if you do it in the morning, don't go to sleep again. Then in the evening we have this process of cleaning. Babuji explained how it has to be done. It is in all our books. But the essence of it is that in meditation you don't use willpower. In cleaning you use willpower. Because he said, sit and put your hands as if you are putting your hands and removing it and throwing it out in the back. People say cleaning is not effective because they don't apply will. They just sit, I am cleaning. And suppose you sit at the table and your plate is there full of food and you say, I am eating. Will the food go inside? So like eating, you have to put your will and act, take the food here. Later on when you clean it this way. See, ingestion, excretion, not this time of fecal matter, but of grossness in the heart. At the night we have a prayer before going to bed. This is in short Sahaj Marg system which Babuji has been teaching, which he received from Lalaji Maharaj. Now some people asked him, and I gave him the question, because when you read Truth Eternal, you find Lalaji Maharaj prescribed mantras for some persons. He prescribed temple worship for some people, Homa for some people. I said, Babuji, why have you not accepted these things? He said, in Lalaji's time, this Sahaj Marg was just being introduced. Many people came who had to do these things, at least start. So Lalaji was a little relaxed. He relaxed the rules a bit for them. He said, you can do what you like, in the faith that they will leave if you continue to meditate. For those whom it left or for those who were able to leave it, they progressed fast. Others stagnated. You see, in this connection, Babuji Maharaj, I asked him once, how long will you continue to assist a person who is disobedient, does not do the practice, is not loyal to you, is not faithful, has no love? He said, I give anybody 3 chances. When 3 chances over, about turn. These are his words, about turn. After that, he drops you like a brick. So we should not try the master's patience too much and do again and again what we think he will excuse as a mere human weakness, see, whatever it may be. We have to obey the rules. We have to get up at dawn, do our meditation. We have the so-called 10 maxims of Sahaj Marg, Das Niyam, Das Usul as it was later called, because originally it was 10 commandments, but then he wanted to change it to 10 maxims, because these are not commandments, these are suggestions, advices, awake before dawn, etc., etc., etc. So this is all very easy. Then came a big shock, a revelation to me. When one day somebody said, I am meditating for 20 years, Babuji Maharaj. I am very regular. So on. I said, why this man is not progressing? Are you not in favor of his progress? He said, I am telling you, he is doing all this, but there is no purpose in his meditation. He has forgotten the goal, why he is doing it. It's like a bull which takes this grinding stone round and round. It does not know why it is doing it. Purposeless. So this man is like that bull, very patient, enduring in his practice, but he has lost the purpose. Meditation must be dynamic. Dynamism, see. That means I must know why I am meditating, what for I am meditating. If most abhyasis who have forgotten this remember it, they would not expect miracles, that somebody would become wealthy, somebody would marry, somebody would have long life, somebody would have children, etc., etc. Because the purpose of meditation is clearly defined. It is my road to achievement of union with the divine. This is the goal of Sahaj Marg. When we remember this, the very act of remembrance makes my window, focus onto this particular goal to the exclusion of everything else. When that window is not remembered, and we are like children, school children looking out of the window without attending to their lessons. We see the bull going, we see the horse galloping, we see the grass growing, cocoa on the tree. And suddenly the teacher asks, Ramo, yes, miss, what are you doing? I have my book. We are like that. We are like less than school children, in fact. In our villages, we see school children walking to the school 3 miles away, 4 miles away. They stop to see every pig being, tied up, every cow that is being fed, every buffalo that's washed in a pond. And like this, they go 2 hours late to the school. Evening, they leave. Instead of coming home at 5:30, they come at 7. Throw a stone here, big a mango, or a tamarind if it's the season, or a guava if that is the season. Run from a dog, bump into a bull, We are like that, we are bumping into circumstances. We have no purpose even in our bumps. Everything is casual, purposeless, unplanned. And if we still have successful lives, it is only the effect of past samskaras. Babaji used to emphasize samskara, samskara, samskara. What are samskaras? And what is the difference between karma and samskara, if any? The Hindu, literature speaks of karma as the accumulation of past lives. Sahaj Marg says it is the result of past thoughts and actions. Karma does not include thoughts, it includes only actions. Babaji and Sahaj Marg go one step ahead or many steps ahead and say, thinking brings. And here we find an echo in Shakespeare, you see. Nothing is good or bad, but thinking makes it so. It is not good or bad in itself. Is poison good? As a medicine, yes. As a food, no. Is a needle useful? Good. For sewing, yes. For poking somebody's eye, no. Are rains good? Always, yes. But no, if you are going out on a picnic when people pray like hell to say, Lord, let it not rain tomorrow, we are going on a picnic. Instead of telling the God not to restrain the rain, you should plan your picnic for a day when it will not rain. Human beings have this nature of requesting God to nullify His action so that we may fulfill our action or activity. Whereas the wise man says, I will conform to Him and do what I can when it is permitted for me to do it. Therefore, the marriage vow, therefore the meeting after the marriage, not before, all these things. Why? Because it's a natural law. But Chariji, isn't it much better to know the man you are going to marry? Yes. But does this also include? No. Why not? Because. Why because? As my grandson used to ask. I said, because. Then it goes on infinitely. Yes, but this is a stupid thing, Chariji. It is natural, We eat when we are hungry, don't we? So like this, we assume that our desires are paramount, important, and need to be fulfilled, and even transcend the laws given to us by our respective religions, which are foolish because they never took into account man's desires. Yes, but does not God know you and say, thou shalt and thou shalt not? But you said, Babuji, in Sahaj Marg there are no do's and don'ts. Babuji said, yes, I did say it and I mean it. Can you not feel guilty if you do what you do without permission, without knowing that you should do it or not do it? Yes, that guilt is what forbids you and creates a samskara. If you do anything without feeling guilty, it does not form a samskara. I said, Babuji, this is a dangerous philosophy to teach to Abhyasis. Because then they say, oh, I don't feel guilty if I haven't say. Guilty, what for? No. So I am telling you something which I heard perhaps 40 years ago, hoping that human beings who listen to this will understand its import, and instead of doing things and saying, I don't feel guilty, avoid anything that will make you guilty, even if it is only taking sugar as a diabetic. If it is going to make you guilty, your diabetes, your sugar count will double. If you don't feel guilty, it will have no effect. Physiological effect, yes, but that's not going to kill me. It's the mind that makes me live, it's the mind that makes me die. You know, in medicine, there's a one hidden factor which is not realized. The will to live. And doctors speak of it in terminal cases. He said, I helped that case live 8 years longer, but this case I'm losing because there's no will to live in this patient. If I don't will to live, I will not live. Again, willpower. Meditation, cleaning, willpower, prayer. My thoughts remain below, my words remain below, rather my words fly above, but my thoughts remain below. Words without thoughts never to heaven go. So we just both, oh God, let me not have this wife nag me again. I just had a couple of, little whiskey on the way, but she will smell my breath. Therefore, I'm smoking a cigar today, Lord. Let her not smell the cigar. So Lord must interfere into my nasal system, put in a plug invisible, and my wife will hug me and say, honey, you don't smell today. Oh yeah, darling, I only look after you and I only think of you. I have always been fascinated by planes. So they come flying around. It's not a disturbance, it's a natural thing, like crows cawing, birds. So we let us bear it, put up your volume a bit. And so that is meditation. What is important in meditation is that it must lead to constant remembrance. That upon which I meditate frequently, regularly, will become the object of my continuous thought. Meditation only helps me to establish the thinking of that particular object, in this case my master, so that even when I am not meditating, I am only thinking of him. Therefore, through meditation comes constant remembrance. Which is the object of meditation? Meditation does not lead to self-realization. Please, whatever literature may say, whatever other gurus may say, whatever even the Vedas may say, meditation leads to your ability to concentrate, which makes thinking of that chosen object of your meditation permanent in your heart, constant remembrance. Then that becomes the object which I shall become automatically by His grace. So at one stage, Babuji says, no more meditation. As he told me when I first went to America in 1972 with him, it was in, I think, Lakewood, Ohio, in Grace Kimball's house. One morning he came and said, Parthasarthi, you can stop meditation now. I said, what do you mean? He said, you don't have to meditate. But there is one condition, you must give that time also for me. I said, why? All my time is yours. I only meditate for you, I don't meditate for myself. He was very pleased. So, you see, meditation has to stop. So, we have this idea, that meditation, cleaning, prayer leads to constant remembrance leads to our continuously being in remembrance of Him, which means that all my thoughts and actions, they have no more any effect on me, because I'm not thinking that I am doing it. Therefore, the effects of my actions, if any, become effects on His actions. And nothing can affect Him, as Lord Krishna says in the Gita, Namam karmani limpanti, name karma phale spuraha. I have no karma in this existence. And actions of karma, the fruits of karma don't affect me. So a master is a person who can act, who can think, who can do without being touched by the result of his actions in any way. So Babuji said, you are liberated now from meditation. You see, you give me that time, you must give me your time. I said 24 hours of my day are yours. So these are some short snippets of instructions that I received from a master during my life with him. And we can continue later on about more things that he said, because, like a water is continuously coming into a well as you take it out. We people who use wells know it, you see, that unless you keep taking water out of a well, the water will stink. You have to keep taking it out. And then the fresh water is coming in all the time. A well is never empty. Similarly, until I pull out everything and I think I can empty it, it doesn't get empty because more is coming in. It is an infinite resource. So in one sense, there can never be an end to this talk. In another sense, there has to be. So we will sort of develop a via media between these two by His grace.